On the Fan guest line, which is powered by Gruber Law. One call. That's all. He covers the Brewers for Forbes Sports and us right here on the Fan. It is a pleasure to welcome in Andrew Wagner, presented by Focus Baseball. Wags, how are you this afternoon, my man?
So what, Sparky couldn't take the heat from my Twitter statistics last night and had to take the day off?
Which Twitter statistics? Which Twitter statistics? I might have missed those.
I was just pointing out home run totals since the trade deadline. Bryce Terang with 5, William Contreras with 4, Blake Perkins with 3, Isaac Collins and Andrew Vaughn with 2 each, and a certain third baseman now with the Seattle Mariners, who many, including our fearless leader and longtime friend, demanded the Brewers obtain. Eugenio Suarez has all of 1 so far. So,
really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's
Suarez. I tell you what, he's been awful now for quite some time. Like I think he's 4 for 48 since the trade deadline.
Wow.
But you go back 25 games. So Andrew Vaughn was called up July 7th. So you go back to July 7th. Both Suarez and Vaughn have played 25 games. Suarez is slashing 176, 232, 473 with 8 home runs, 17 RBI. He's got 28 strikeouts, 8 walks, and 91 at-bats in the 725 OPS. Not including last night, which would have been game 26. Vaughn slashing 348, 412, 629 with 7 homers, 28 RBI. He's got a 13-10 strikeout to walk ratio on 89 at-bats and a 1041 OPS. People like to say, well, it doesn't count because it wasn't at the deadline. Well, July 7th also happens to be the day that Milwaukee obtained CC Sabathia in 2008, which is considered the greatest trade deadline acquisition in Brewers history. So
that's a great point, numbers. Wags. And roster construction can happen at any time on the calendar other than, July 31st or August 1st through the end of this. It can happen in the offseason. It can happen in April, May, June, or earlier in July. And not to mention, and I know, and maybe they've come around to it, but Wags, I remember the last time I was here with you, and Brandon Woodruff was on the verge of coming back from his injury, and I said to you then, and I think you agreed, that's almost a trade deadline acquisition, and he's looked every bit the ace since he's come back and has been probably better than any starting pitcher that was traded at the trade deadline.
Yep, and people have called that, a cop-out and covering for a franchise that won't spend money. But you look at Brandon Woodruff's numbers, okay? Look at what he's done the last couple starts. You tell me what teams would give up to get a frontline starting pitcher who's been putting up those numbers. Just look, and I'm not trying to rub the salt in the wounds there, Rami. I love you, and I'm not trying to.
I know.
You look 90 miles to the south. What was the Cubs' biggest need going into the trade dedeadline?
Probably starting pitching. Yeah.
Look at what they gave up to get Mike Soroka, who's not even pitching now. Teams would spend a fortune to get a guy like Brandon Woodruff, and all the Brewers had to do was call him up. You're right. Roster construction happens year round, and you can make the argument if the Brewers don't go and make that move for Quinn Priester in April or May, and if they don't make that move to trade Savali for Vaughn and then bring Vaughn up in early July, you could make the argument they might have been in a position to sell at the deadline without those moves. So it's easy to look back and say they should have done this, they should have done that, but sometimes your best moves, aren't made in those last 24 hours. Sometimes you made the moves you need ahead of that deadline.
Talking with Andrew Wagner, covers the Brewers for Forbes Sports, us right here on The Fan. He's brought to you by Focus Baseball. And I was talking before I brought you on about this Brewers team, Wags, and I was asking because I was out last night and ran into some friends who were Brewers fans, and they wanted to rub the salt in the wounds of me, a Cubs fan, a little bit. And all I could say in return was, yeah, man, the Brewers are really good, and they're a really fun team to watch. I got nothing negative to really say about these guys, and they came back at me with, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and I'm paraphrasing here, how they break our hearts this year. What's different about this Brewers team than recent playoff Brewers team that you can put your finger on?
I think that it comes down to the simple fact that they're the most well-rounded team that this organization has had in quite some time. You look back at some of their recent playoff run teams. going all the way back to 2008. Okay, the strength back then was a bunch of dudes who absolutely crushed the baseball,
Yep.
which made up for a whole lot of pitching deficiencies. You basically had Brandon Woodruff and Giovanni at that point, who was coming off an injury. 2011, you had good pitching, you had a good offense, but they were still very streaky, strikeout prone. They weren't great defensively. 2008 kind of was just a perfect storm where the team just got hot and was riding basically a hodgepodge of pitching and a dominant bullpen to a deep run. All right, the runs after that, they were a little different. At that 2021, 23, you had all that great pitching. The Brewers had no offense. Last year, it was a pretty well-rounded team. This is even better. I mean, they are flawless defensively. They are playing absolutely beautiful manufactured baseball offensively. We heard the quote from Connor Dawson earlier this week. You make it hell for the pitcher 1 through 9.
Yep.
They're doing that. They are not striking out a ton. They're not hitting in the double plays, which is the ultimate rally killer. When you have a team that puts guys on base as much as the Brewers do and doesn't have the power as the Brewers don't, that's a recipe for rally killing double plays. The Brewers don't do that. And then you've got to say nothing of the starting pitching and the bullpen. I mean, this is a very deep team, 1 through 26. This is probably the best quote unquote team, singular unit that's in the field around. Do they have the big stars? No. Obviously, the Dodgers have the best collection of talent in baseball. There's no argument there. Not even putting the Brewers on that level. But when you put together the sum of the parts, or whatever the cliche is, you're going to be hard pressed to find a better solid 1 through 26 unit in all facets of the game than the Brewers right now.
A lot of people would say, and I won't even hide behind a lot of people would say, Wags, I said about 5 or 6 weeks ago that I don't know how sustainable this hot run that the Brewers were already on at that point. I don't know how sustainable it is, because they weren't hitting the ball hard and they weren't hitting it over the fence, and that's how you win games in the modern. Home runs are one of the greatest win predictors in the game today. The Brewers are kind of bucking that trend. Do you think that in a weird way, though, what you're describing, this team that puts pitchers through hell and makes you work 1 through 9 without the long ball, it almost makes it more sustainable that they don't have to count on the home runs night in and night out to win games, and the fact that they don't strike out?
Well, for starters, people keep overlooking the Brewers' power. So since the trade deadline, so the month of August, basically, they're third in all of baseball. They're actually tied for second with the White Sox with 18 home runs. Only the Blue Jays, who have 19 this month, have more home runs. The Brewers' slugging percentage in the month of August is second to only the Blue Jays. So the power is there. It hasn't been as consistent. It hasn't been there as frequently, but the power exists in this lineup. And you're going to be getting more power back when you get Rhys Hoskins, who's probably going to be coming off the bench, when you get Jackson Chourio coming back from his injury, when Christian Yelich inevitably goes back on one of his heaters, because that's just who he is.
Yeah.
The power is there. We've been talking sustainability about this team now for a year and a half. Everyone said last year, how long can they sustain this? They won, 93 games. They're on pace to win damn near 100 this year. I think the argument about this being sustainable is exhausted at this point, because they've proven that they can do it. Are they going to do this day in and day out the rest of the year? Absolutely not. They're going to go into a slump. But that's why it's important to ride this heater now as long as you can, to build up that cushion. So when you do inevitably go into a little bit of a swoon, you have some cushion, you have some insurance there, and it's not going to decimate your season.
You've been around this game for a long time, covering this game for a while now. As long as I've been at the station in my on and off stints here, have you ever covered a manager as fun as Pat Murphy is?
No, I've never covered anyone as fun as Pat Murphy. He is considering who the Brewers used to have sitting in that chair, who was pretty much devoid of any and all personality except feeding contempt. A guy so miserable that he made me look like a pleasant human being. It's night and day. It's amazing to be able to ask a major league manager a question about strategy and not be belittled and insulted and mocked and put in the corner for asking a simple question.
Talking with Andrew Wagner, who covers the Brewers for Forbes Sports, and us right here on The Fan, brought to you by Focus Baseball. I think tonight is a perfect example of why the Brewers have been so good and so consistent and have been able to sustain this. And you talked about the starting pitching. I think with a lot of teams that were on 10-game winning streaks and Paul Skeens is running out there, you'd go, maybe their luck runs out tonight and the win streak ends. And maybe it does, but you run Freddie Peralta out there tonight, and you feel pretty damn good about your chances with that guy taking on Paul Skeens, don't you?
Yeah, and you look at what the Brewers did against Skeens the last time out, when it was Skeens and Meteoric. They didn't slobber him by any stretch of the imagination, but they just did what they always do. They nickeled and dimed. They made the guy work, and they chased him, I think, in the fourth inning. Obviously he has tape of that. He knows what the Brewers are going to do coming into there. He's prepared for that. But the Brewers' style of play appeals. It matches up well when you're going up against good pitchers because you're still making them work. They're not going to be able to come up there and just fireball you and strike you out left and right because these guys have really good ball strike recognition. They do really good pitch selection. Like, these matchups tend to be favorable for the makeup of the Brewers' offense.
You mentioned the stat that you put out last night that you think Sparky ran and hid from about the OPS of third baseman Eugenio Suarez and Andrew Vaughn and some others on the Brewers. You shared another, and this was from MLB Now, but you shared another stat, a tweet about notable Brewers with listed height in 2025 WAR, and it's Durbin, Collins, Frelick, Ortiz, and Terang, who respectively are 5'7", 5'8", 5'8", 5'10", and 5'11", and all those guys performing. And Wags, it just goes to prove that short kings like myself, who stand at 5'7" and 7'8", we can get the job done. We can get the job done, Wags. I like that stat better than even your third baseman stat, to be quite honest with you. Oh, did we lose Wags? I think he dropped off. That's all right. Just tell him it was a stupid question. It was a dumb, stupid, fun question that I want to close the interview out with. Short guys can get it done, is what I'm trying to tell you. In baseball and elsewhere. That's right. Us guys who stand 5'8" on a good posture day. We can do some things in this world. You don't have to be like Charlie Houston over there. How tall are you, Charlie?
6'3".
I'm surprised every time I stand. I don't know why. I think it's because I just see him through the glass, like most of the time.
Do I look like a short guy?
Most of the time.
Do I have a short face?
I can't tell your height from here. I just see your shoulders and your head coming out from atop that computer monitor that's in front of you. And then you walk out and you stand next to me, and I'm like, God, I'm short. Standing next to this
There's still people taller than me. Andrew Wagner's taller than me.
That is true. He's a big dude. Wags is a big dude, and he's very good at covering the Brewers for Forbes Sports and us right here on the Brewers. And he's brought to you by Focus Baseball One, and he joins me on the Fan Guest Hotline powered by Gruber Law. One call, that's all. We'll hit a quick break. On the other side, I got to talk about something, and I think every time I fill in for Sparky, I'm like, I got to talk about this. It's irking me. It's getting under my skin, and it continues to happen. They continue to pound at this rock, and it makes no sense whatsoever. Little Bucks talk for you on Wisconsin Sports Daily, served up by Wendy's, live from the 1250 a.m., 105.7 FM, The Fan Studios, and powered by the Potawatomi